The podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first-time Stephen King reader.
Hi, we're here. It's the end of 2020. We made it to our last episode of Floats Down Here for 2020. Survival.
Survival edition.
Literally fits for the book, fits for the year. We are here discussing The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, which was published in 1999. Everybody insert your favorite Prince song now. This book was 224 pages long, so it was kind of short. For a king, it was short. The dedication said, "This is for my son Owen, who ended up teaching me a lot more about the game of baseball than I ever taught him." I am, of course, joined, as always, by my brothers, Luke and Ben. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey. Always nice to be back. Nice to see you all again.
That was both informative and entertaining. Thank you.
I'm here to talk about the book.
Killing it, boys. Just killing it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and give you the front inside cover synopsis because my back cover is not a synopsis. So I'm going to read this to you. Here we go. What if the woods were full of them? And of course they were. The woods were full of everything you didn't like. Everything you were afraid of and instinctively loathed. Everything that tried to overwhelm you with nasty, no-brain panic. The brochure promised a moderate to difficult 6-mile hike on the main New Hampshire branch of the Appalachian Trail, where 9-year-old Tricia McFarland was to spend Saturday with her older brother Pete and her recently divorced mother. When she wanders off to escape their constant bickering, then tries to catch up by attempting a shortcut through the woods, Tricia strays deeper into a wilderness full of peril and terror, especially when night falls. Tricia has only her wits for navigation, only her ingenuity as a defense against the elements, only her courage and faith to withstand her mounting fear. For solace, she tunes her Walkman to broadcasts of Boston Red Sox games and the gritty performances of her hero, number 36, relief pitcher Tom Gordon. And when her radio's reception begins to fade, Tricia imagines that Tom Gordon is with her, her key to surviving an enemy known only by the slaughtered animals and mangled trees in its wake. A classic story that engages our emotions at the most primal level, The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon explores our deep dread of the unknown and the extent to which faith can conquer it. It is a fairy tale grimmer than grim, capital G, but aglow with a girl's indomitable spirit. It was a very long synopsis.
I feel like you just read the whole book. That's about how long it felt like the book took.
224 pages of a synopsis.
Of synopsis. That's literally just called a novel.
So we're going to go ahead and jump right into our. Well, actually, let's do a little bit of thanks and shout outs and welcomes. If one of you could do that for me, I'd appreciate it really fast.
Yeah, if you're new here, welcome. We kindly ask for you to subscribe and share this. If you've been here before, welcome back. We'd always appreciate seeing good old friends.
Thank you for the time filler, as I wished a child good night. Safe and sound and not lost in the woods. Okay.
Perfect. Pretty similar age to specifically our character. Not far out.
Kind of.
Not far out.
That one's actually that one's closer in age to the older brother.
Right.
So that actually kind of brings me to my first big conversation here. I read this book when it first came out. I remember buying this in the store. I remember waiting for it to come out. I have a hard copy book. I never have hard copies of Stephen King. I have a hard copy book. I was 20 when I read this. This book feels a lot different at 41, let me tell you. Because I'm not the kid lost in the woods anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm the mom who lost the kid. And as I was reading this, I was like, oh, one of my girls. And I realized my girls are almost 13 and almost 16. It's my son who's almost 8, right? The baby of my family that would be closest in age to this. And when that hit me, I was like, oh, I don't know if I could do this. I don't know if I could read a story because there's no way he'd survive.
Yeah.
Most of my kids would die too. But I'm just saying, that's how I felt. Very much the mom who lost her kid.
And I can understand that. I had no information about this one. No movie's been made. There's in the works right now. It was supposed to happen in 2004, but he died. Not Sam Raimi, I think, or I looked it up. But anyway, the director that was on board, but now it's the guys who did It are trying to get this done. And so I knew nothing about it, and kind of going into it, trying to put myself in the positions, and I couldn't just as a 36-year-old guy, just couldn't put myself in the mindset. So I related it to the closest thing. And that goes my first note of old here. She is written too old. King always does this. Like I've made this complaint several times, but this one hits really hard. I put Layla in this position. I could totally see one of your daughters, the middle kid, hitting,
Oh, I just said goodnight too. You saw the hair.
Yeah. I could see her at, her age right now doing everything Trisha did. If it was written as a 12, 13-year-old, no issue, perfectly fine. Everything makes sense. As a 9-year-old, it's too advanced on some things. There's a few that are like, okay, that's funny. And like the fuck yous, because I just got to that part today, my reread. And she's like, that's the first time I said it. And it's like, you're old as hell in your mind, kind of thing. But then you realize, oh, wait, she's 9. So that one makes sense. But other ones just like, it's too old. Like you're beyond your years on this. And it's not because you're clever, but King always writes his kids or at least the good kids, as always way smarter than most you would ever find.
I agree. I feel like this falls into that same thing that we've seen it a handful of times, right? We spent a lot of time with the kids in It. It took us felt like 40 years to get through that book, but we spent a lot of time with those kids, and a lot of them felt really age appropriate, some of them, but they have like a range of, but that one felt better. Like it seemed like it fit. Overall. We have other characters like
The Shining.
The Shining, right. And Salem's Lot. There were a couple kids in there that was like,
or the kid in Needful Things with the baseball card, right?
Written a little too old, but maybe that's why it makes this a just compelling story. I don't know. I think it's a problem personally. Some of them it works. Some of them, to me, this one that's why I said when we saw a certain daughter on screen, I was like, this fits somebody that I know, and I related it to her as well. And her age group currently, it would make sense. Oh, yeah. But take a year or 2, 3 off
3.5.
And even at an advanced level at that age, there are just certain things that felt off. I completely agree with that. And that kind of hits on what I had my first note here of a story about survival with limited preparation, right? Like, she's thrust into this living in the woods without knowing it's going to be a thing until she finds out she's lost. And she makes some mistakes right away, right? Getting lost, that's kind of how it happens, right? You make a couple quick mistakes and they compound really quickly. And that's kind of what happens here. But she did have some bits of information that it seemed like, especially, and I thought this was where it actually did make somewhat sense, the knowledge level that she had on survival-ish stuff, because her mom has been making this big deal about going hiking to try to save this relationship with her kids, because this divorce, the separation between the parents, is driving some knives in between all 4 of their intermingled relationships, I think, right? So this is something that her mom is trying to do is to get them out into nature and take these hikes and things and teach her some of these things. So there were a bunch of them, these skills that she had that normally would have felt just kind of fabricated and too easy. But at least there was a reason why she was somewhat primed for this. I thought was done well overall. Yeah. But, you know, she ends up getting through. In all honesty, I thought she was toast many times. And I, in all honesty, probably thought that could have been a better ending. But we'll get there.
Yeah, I'm not, like, I remember being really into this the first time. I was like, oh, is she going to make it out? And I obviously knew the ending when I read this time. And there were things that I found really interesting. Like, I really liked the scene when she finally found the water for the second time after the one kind of petered out and was drinking from it. And then she found like the patches of berries and the nuts and all those different things. I liked those kinds of things. The beast thing, whatever. I don't know if that was necessary. I would have just liked to see her make it through the woods. That alone was scary for me. You know, like that's more realistic scary. So that may have been a better story for me. Like, does she make it out as opposed to she's being chased by this weird whatever it is? Just me. But
not just you.
Okay. All right. I didn't know I was going with that. But yeah, like I wasn't invested. You know, after about ending 4, which, by the way, this book is brought up in innings and not chapters, which I like.
I like
right? I like those things. But by about ending 4, I was like, are we there yet? Like, I'm good. Can we just get a couple of 3 quick outs and move on? I'm ready. And like the first 7 innings are the first 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, it's been 7 days. Like they skip. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't know. The pacing felt weird with some of the chapters. Like he was trying too hard to fit it into 9 innings, but some of the story, right, the Stephen King detail of the story took longer than probably if he had evenly spaced out his story over time in the innings. I don't know.
Yeah. He did drone on in several areas where they just, you know, it was like, okay, we get it. She was stung or she's, you know, battling these mosquitoes and everything. And I get it. He's setting the tone and reminding you, you know, about it. And it's, this one, could have been a little, for as short of a book as it is, could have been faster paced in a sense.
Yeah. I struggle with this book a little bit, in all honesty. I've been a part of a group that's been lost in dangerous woods at one point in my life.
Didn't you have to carry a canoe with you as well?
We abandoned it, but we were carrying it originally. A canoe and 2 kayaks is what we had when we got stuck on a river down in Arkansas. Family trip. There were 4 of us, 2 of which were me and the Gertie, Mr. Narrow Sea himself, who we've referenced before, and our uncle. And let's see, I mean, how old were Abby and I at this point? I mean, it was probably, let's see if
probably 12, 11.
I was going to say like the 12, 13 range, probably. And then we had Riley, who would have been a 5-6-year-old at the time. There's power numbers for sure. It is disorienting when you're out there, and like I think one thing that she does really, really well is pick a direction and go with it, as opposed to backtracking, as opposed to changing the plan until she has to. Like, I think that's an important thing that she does do is she picks that direction and just sticks with it. I mean, and she could be running into the middle of a desert. She doesn't know that, but at least she's.
I will say, I think that was like the thing that felt most 9-year-old to me. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do it. Mm-hmm. And she picked west.
Yeah.
Because she knew which way west was. I'm going to go west. And I was like, but if you thought about where you were when you entered the woods, which way was the road?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was east. Like, it said that, you know? Like, and I was just... Because if you go east, I mean, you're in Maine. Eventually, you'll hit an ocean.
Yeah, you're just west of You're just west of Ludlow.
Like you're gonna hit an ocean or a road or something. You go west, you could end up in the middle of Canada before anybody finds you. You go east when you are on the East Coast because there's something really big you're gonna get to at some point.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and
I did like the part where she made her biggest mistake. Do you remember that part?
After drinking all the water?
No, this was see if I can find it here. It was at the end of the seventh, or it was right before the seventh inning stretch. Here it goes. So she had gone through all those marshes, right? And gone through all the different things. And she was on the far ridge of the marsh. She's like, where do we go? And it says, let me see. So she found another set of like quagmires, right? Another set of all those marshes, which, by the way, total Hobbit moment. I just like, I was thinking of Frodo and Sam going through the dead marshes. Look, this is all like a picture. I was waiting for a
Which
face
was referenced a couple times. Lord of the Rings and Bilbo.
So she's like, I'm not going through that again. I can't go through this one more time, right? So she turned, so thinking, Trisha turned fully north, walking along the east side of the marsh that sprawled along the valley's floor. She had done a great many things right since becoming lost, more than she ever would have guessed. But this was a bad decision, the worst she'd made since leaving the path in the first place. Had she crossed the marsh and climbed the ridge, she would have found herself looking down at Devlin Pond on the outskirts of Greenmount, New Hampshire. Devlin was small, but there were cottages on its south end and a camp road leading out to New Hampshire Route 52. On a Saturday or a Sunday, Trisha almost certainly would have heard the burr of powerboats on the pond as weekenders towed kids on water skis. After 4th of July, there would have been powerboats out there any day of the week. Sometimes so many that they had to weave to avoid each other. But this was midweek in early June. There was no one out on Devlin but a couple of fishermen with little 20-horse putt-putts, and Trisha consequently heard nothing but birds and frogs and bugs. Instead of finding the pond, she turned toward the Canadian border and began walking deeper into the woods. But 400 miles ahead was Montreal. Between it and her, not much. That was the moment you're like, oh man, she really could be done for, right? To me, that was the big, okay, this has some meat right here. You were so close, kid. They're not going to find you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're limiting the potential for happenstance now, right? Like you're literally going into more deserted territory, lower population, and she doesn't know this. You know, she doesn't actively make that choice. Right. It's just the nature of what does happen, though. And the narrator's telling us these things, and it's just like, man. Yeah, that's like turning into the Gobi Desert. Like, not a good choice.
Yeah. And I don't think it's a fair thing to say it's her second biggest mistake, because the biggest mistake, yes, was walking away from the path, trying to do the shortcut, and then just turning the wrong way and going that about. But calling that a mistake, it's not. It's just making the wrong choice.
But I think that was the point. Like,
no, I know, and I'm just saying, like, on the narrator's side of it, I disagree with using that verbiage just because that's just not fair of it. It's usually you made the wrong choice. You chose poorly.
Inherently has a judgment aside with it that she doesn't have the context to know that that's
right.
It's with the full context. Yes, big mistake, and the narrator does. I think that's why he's using it that way.
Right. Monday morning quarterbacking. He's saying she did a lot of things right. Once the initial mistake happened, like she's really like pulled through. Right. This was a bad call in the third quarter. Like she's. Yeah. Sorry, I'm mixing my sports metaphors.
Please keep with the baseball theme, all right?
I'm sorry. There has been like a whole
athletic metaphors on us. That's the whole book is based on this.
It's like calling in Isringhausen to save a 2-1 game. Come on,
it's gonna happen. He's a stud.
Especially if LaRussa's
it would just be bases loaded.
Oh, I was gonna blame Athene, but sure.
No, Isringhausen was LaRussa era.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna pull us back because talking about making the wrong decision and not wrong, but like making the choice that wasn't as good, right? If she had gone through there, it would have been a better choice for her. Something else that really works against her, and Benj, you've got a note about this. I'm going to say the adult behavior with the missing child, starting with some of the assumptions they're making about how far she would or wouldn't walk.
Yeah.
But I'd like you to kind of go with that.
Yeah, so because I actually have been on Manhunt or body searches and such and that kind of stuff. And yeah, you start off with about, in the forest wise, with about a 15-20 mile, depending on the timeline. I mean, it was only 5 hours, 5 to 6 hours when she was reported missing, I believe. Maybe 8. But with reasonable mentality, if you're walking in the woods, you're going to think, okay, they can maybe clear 15-20 miles at most. but most people are going to stand still or not going to go so far out of where they're trying to, like, they might make circles trying to find it. She just, like you said, walked a straight line, and that's where they set the perimeter. By the time they said that, she was already 20 or 15 miles past. So, first mistake, but not really a mistake, just a bad choice. My issue is this is the danger of false reporting. The guy who called in on the payphone and called about Francis Raymond Mazerol in the blue Ford Econoline, you could tell that was just somebody who had an axe to grind with this guy, maybe because he was charged with child molestation and was facing charges in Maine. So he's being brought back for that, but it had any relation to her. And they even proved it because he had witnesses, he had corroborating story on that. And for this guy to use this to his advantage one way or the other, the reporter, you just damn near killed this little girl by doing that. You had no proof this person was, involved or anything like that, but it basically took, let's say 50% of the, mindset off of her, and 50% makes a huge difference. And so that was a big takeaway I got from this one. It was like only a few throwaway lines that mentioned him or mentioned all this. But at the same time, it was a huge thing because of that, they're looking for they turned into a body search over a missing girl. So they limited it to 30 miles out at most when she was already another 30 past.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good point. Like, they're not making the best choices in terms of finding her. And I know they think they're going on their best possible information, but it's literally finding a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I know there's a lot of, not studies that I've done myself, but there's like a whole show about the first 48, right? So it's pretty well known that initial time, the further you get from that, say, first 48 hours of missing person, like the statistics just tank, on the likelihood. Any probabilistic nature goes down the drain almost. And it's having just that one, I don't know how many hours they wasted finding this guy, talking to him, and using that manpower for that. I mean, it was like a whole day, right? That the narrator was like, that wasn't manpower being used to finding her. And like Benji, you brought up, which is a really great point, that changed the nature of what they were looking for. As opposed to an active hunt. It was, a recovery at that point, which has a different, unfortunately, level of effort and gusto. And like you said, it starts limiting that range to an area that she's already not there. So, I think it's a really good point there.
Let's talk baseball.
Yeah, there was a lot of baseball talk in this, and a lot of it felt really natural. I'll be honest, as somebody who played a lot of baseball up into college, I thought it was good and not heavy-handed. There was one point, I couldn't remember what it was after I wrote this note. There was one specific point around the 8th inning that he makes a baseball reference, like some jargon, and I'm like, you're kind of just shoehorning that one in because you had like a list that I need to work the word balk in or whatever it is. And it might have been balk, but I don't think it was. But there was only one point where I was like, okay, now you're just looking through the vocabulary list. But overall, I liked...
There were a couple of the bug issues that I had with that one.
The bugs?
Yeah, because he kept calling them minges and they're midges.
Right, yeah.
But from her perspective, she hears the word. I had to keep telling myself it's what her internalization
and
is.
The no-see-ums.
Yeah, well, those are actual bugs.
Right, I know. But those are like the ones I can remember her saying all the time.
Sorry, Betch, we're talking baseball right now.
I know, sorry. But anyway,
I know it's not your thing.
No, you're fine. I was just agreeing with you.
So, overall, I really appreciated that the story was set around the innings of a game. Like, you knew exactly what progression you had without looking at, I've got this many pages left or this much percentage or hours left in the book. It was just
I'm in the 4th inning.
I'm in
the 6th inning.
Yeah, okay. And I can tell, like, maybe, like, reading back, I might do this shortly and just be like, okay, let's see what kind of game this really feels like. Because a lot of it's just not good, right? She doesn't have that many big wins. She's got a bunch of big losses, but she still ends up winning the game. So, like, was there a double play that he wrote in there somehow? Anyway, so the other thing, like Benji said, going into this, I didn't know almost anything about what this book was going to be, but I did know who Tom Gordon was, and I was very curious as to how that would play into the story, knowing who Tom Gordon was. And obviously, reading the book, you learn a lot about his career, at least while he was playing for the Red Sox. He was a stud. I mean, that year he led the American League with 44 saves. He was awesome that year, and that was his second year playing for the Red Sox, I believe, maybe third. Maybe went there 96. So second full season, but either way, like, it was interesting knowing that this book was written a year later, or published a year later in 1999, and it's based on 1998 Red Sox season to an extent. Knowing that Tom Gordon, the pitcher, is going to read this book and see this, like, somewhat fictional representation of him. Like, I wonder what his thoughts were. I really want to see a Tom Gordon interview about this book, where he's like this savior presence. Obviously, the closer in a game is the guy who gets the save. But it's a really weird thing for, like, a professional athlete to have this uber well-known author write a book that is going to be guaranteed a New York bestseller.
Like, not just an uber well-known author, but an uber well-known author who is embedded in the area,
the fabric of your community. Yeah,
right. Like,
absolutely.
New England heart and soul here.
Like, I'm just curious. Like, when he first found out, Tom Gordon, that is, was he like, what? I don't know, like, I'm just so curious about that.
See, what I would have loved is, like, the book to come out, say, July of 99 or something, midway through the season, and then all of a sudden Tom Gordon's like, I want to be fucking traded. Get me off this team. And, like, just, like, without even knowing about the book, like, just, like, right beforehand, asking for a trade or something, then the book comes out, and it's like
ooh.
No, the girl who loved Nomar Garciaparra.
Right.
Talk about Nomar. Like, okay, so we're fairly big baseball fans in this family. I know, Ben, you're more of a football guy. Like,
No, I'm actually more hockey, if anything.
Okay,
but
right, but
yeah.
like, I know baseball's not always like thing, but
I enjoy it.
Yeah, but we were like bred on baseball, regardless of the sports we all played or didn't play. In some of our cases, baseball was like the sound of our house growing up.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I read this when I first came out in 99. I'm just reading it. Makes sense, right? Baseball, I got this. Reading it now, there are names like Nomar Garciaparra. You're like, oh, I thought about him in so long. And you're just, I don't know. It was
and
just
like talked about Jeter's first year, because that's who they were playing, the Yankees, and Jeter's first year. And
Mo Vaughn. There were a ton of names. I was just like, yeah, that feels like we're going back and playing Ken Griffey Jr. baseball on N64. I mean, I traded for Tom Gordon every year. That I promise you. He was a stud.
I'm not like I said, I knew nothing about Tom Gordon like until this book, and so like all the other names I knew. His was the only baseball name that I am not familiar with, just because I've never been a Red Sox fan. So, no, I shouldn't. Yeah.
Like, I just, so back to baseball. I liked that part of this book so much. I went and watched Moneyball.
Nice.
Because it was close in era. It was only a couple years
later,
right after that, when Johnny Damon was being traded away from Oakland to Boston. I was like, yep, I miss baseball. Like,
yeah, and I really love that. Obviously, that was kind of our way of exploring her relationship with her dad, right? And that's kind of its place, and also, her fascination, infatuation with Tom Gordon himself, and just respecting and all of the, I don't know, psychological, philosophical things she goes through, about what is religion and what happens after we die, kind of things, as she's literally thinking she's going to die, multiple times. And that's one reason Tom Gordon becomes her savior, is because he was well known for pointing to the sky after he won a save. And that was like the first time that she asked her dad, like, what do you believe in? And I thought all of that really felt natural, like what a kid would think of, and hearkening back to, oh, well, I know these players and I listen to these games with my dad, and having him intertwined in some of these hallucinations she's having. I thought that was all pretty well done.
Yeah. I really like the dedication of this book.
Would you read it again for us?
Sort of, because it was about a dad who connected with his kid in a way, and that, like, the idea that my kid can teach me more about a sport than I can teach him. And I feel like as a parent, that hits me a little harder. And I know it's kind of dumb to be so connected to a dedication, but I think that touches on her connection with her dad over the sport, right? Mm-hmm. I know that each of my children has taught me about the sport of their choice more than I would ever have learned ever on my own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's fun to learn from your children. It's fun to see them be passionate about something. And my son is nothing if not passionate about whatever topic is his topic of choice for the year. Changes every couple of years, right? We went through like a dinosaur phase and a transformer phase. We are hardcore Kansas City Chiefs right now. Like to the point where yesterday he told me, Mom, I know we're in St. Louis, but Kansas City's in my heart. I just have to live there with it when I'm an adult. So like that part of it also struck me because that's how she is with Boston, right? Like, not that she's like, oh, I'm gonna, but that's her team. Those are her guys, and that felt age appropriate, right? Yes. Like, I'm gonna live and die by my team.
Mm-hmm. Hardcore loyalty was good.
Yeah, and okay, so that kind of ties into my point because I know I just have a random word here of Game Boy.
Oh no, go for it.
Because the reason I have this is because she falls down early in inning 3, I think, inning 2 or 3, and shatters her Game Boy, but the Walkman's saved. The Walkman's still there and everything like that. And she, even before this, has said, I have to make sure to conserve the batteries. I can't do that. She didn't take the batteries from the Game Boy. And at this point, there was no Game Boy SP, Advanced SP, which was the first lithium battery. I looked it up, came out in 01. So they were still the AA batteries, and Walkmans used AA batteries. So like, it's just like, and that shows that is age appropriate to not think, oh, the Game Boy's broken, so the battery's probably one, like, she just doesn't think about it. But that's her one connection to the outside world. That's her one connection to her dad. That's the one voice. And she's even thought, I can't let the battery say, so I can only listen to half the game at a time, or, one ending here and ending there. And it hits me. It's like, hon, you gave up probably 2 or 3 more days of radio and might have been able to get some more information of, hey, we're looking in this area here or something. And it's just like, and that just stood out to me on it with it. Like you said, having that dedication, being her team, being her, kind of thing. And once she lost that, once she woke up and she's like, oh, that's when my heart sunk. It was like, I was hoping, and then I was hoping for maybe she would have been like, oh yeah, I still have the Game Boy. Nope. She just discarded it or left it and never came up again. And I'm like, damn it. I wanted her, to have her hear at least one more game, maybe as she's walking out, like right before she gets attacked at the end, have Tom Gordon come in and he just hit the save, then attack. I don't know. It just stood out to me.
Batteries. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I didn't think about that either. I honestly, I kind of actually forgot about the Game Boy entirely. Like, it was pretty subtle. Like, it wasn't really dwelt upon much because then she has so many other things going on, right? Like, it's a really good pickup, Benj, because, yeah, I mean, that is absolutely a valuable fuel source, right? Like,
video games.
For, like,
it's my
for, like, the one emotional thing that she can control. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, she just didn't think about it.
Exactly. Now, if it was Pete, he would have, been heartbroken that the Game Boy was broken. She didn't care because that was just older gaming, nerd brother.
All right, Luke.
So let's talk about the Beast. And I put other characters in here, but I think we've kind of touched on parents, and there wasn't much with the brother. Whatever.
Brothers suck.
This one wasn't great. I've seen better. But the Beast itself.
Yep.
I consistently throughout this would have been more disappointed is if it turned out to be what it felt like it was trying to act like it was. Multiple times in reading this, whether it's the diction, whether it's the way it's being talked about, very, very specifically feel like it was referencing Pennywise or some rendition of that. Coming back to Georgie and this, the whole nature of this story is that fear, right? And how that, which will always make me go back to the fear of the unknown, right? And going into it and out. It's a very Pennywise thing, right? That chapter 1, Georgie going down to get the pine tar, not the pine tar, but the
Turtle wax.
the turtle wax.
So paraffin wax.
Paraffin wax. And just that innate sense of fear when he turns his back and runs back up the stairs. Inherently, that felt like that was a part of the lurking monster, whatever it is, just beyond her sight, that's doing these things, that rips the head off a deer, that draws a circle around her when she's sleeping in this truck overnight that she found derelict. And it just really, really seemed to feel... And there was also several points where it talks about it likes to feed on the fear because it makes the meat sweet. She says that to herself multiple times, and that is specifically a Pennywise thing. I mean, it's within this universe, but over and over, I thought it was being bashed in our head that, hey, you probably read it. There's so many things that are specifically Pennywise. And even when we see the Beast, it comes down to the same thing that a Pennywise is. In my opinion, it puts on this face, and she's hallucinating, I think, when she is finally confronted by this bear. She sees this big ravenous monster, right? And how does she defeat it? By standing up to it. It literally just telling it, you can't hurt me, or I'm going to fight back. We saw that work against Pennywise so many times, whether it's the Birds book, whether it's doing quite literally anything but just being terrified.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is it just me that felt like it was saying, hey, this is basically Pennywise, but it really isn't?
Okay. I do have something, because I was doing a little research on this, trying to come up with notes, and just looking back, and came across something. It's not Pennywise.
Yeah, I don't think it is. It just seems like it's...
Think about the location I mentioned where she was right outside of when this first started. She was right outside of Ludlow, Maine.
Oh, vampire.
Wendigo.
Okay.
From Pet Sematary, the Wendigo from them. It's what's been speculated as... I'm not claiming any, I just found this information, but it's been speculated that it's the Wendigo from the Pet Sematary that was following her and took the shape of the bear in the very end to make her the final grab at her until it was shot and made to, basically taken out. And then the Wendigo took off from the bear, kind of thing, met its match per se.
Okay, so hold on. No, finish your thought. I'll go back.
No, that's pretty much that's pretty much it. It was the Wendigo that was hunting and like giving her the visions, giving her the, mindset, kind of walk this way, do this thing, trying to draw her in as best he could. And again, I didn't get into the full. I literally found this about an hour before we got on, so I didn't get a chance to fully flesh it out. But it was like,
I'm with it. I believe it. I'm good.
Yeah. From just based off the area, it'd be more.
That's the thing my brain just did. Like, what's up with Maine that they've got this pocket here with this extraterrestrial dimensional bad guy, and then they've got down here where the vampires live, and then they have this thing with the ancient indigenous people's demon zone. And you guys haven't read Bag of Bones. There's the ghosty zone, and then there's this zone, and then there's the rabid dog zone, and that's pretty dangerous.
I feel like we could do that same type of thing around parts of St. Louis proper. Just saying.
That's true, but maybe not with the paranormal type things.
Yeah. I mean, we got the Exorcist House, we got the Hell Road, or
so yeah. I all good thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, I saw that Luke, and I was like, "Oh, did he find the same information I did?"
I didn't look at it. And I didn't think it was Pennywise, but I totally forgot about Wendigo. But even reading that, I remember that when we got into that, it felt similar to some of the Pennywise stuff. I would want to read that and see what other supporting evidence there is, but I feel better about that. That I can jive with. And
in fairness, it's on the Stephen King wiki, fandom wiki, that has where the Wendigo shows up. Pet Sematary, Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon.
Where the Wendigos are.
Where the Wendigos roam.
H.O. baby.
Oh man, that's all I got. I think.
Yeah,
I just
same.
want to say, like, I didn't go that far into thinking about the beast other than every time it showed up, or I was like, you know what? I don't care. I don't care that there's a beast. I don't care that it's going to get her. Can we just have a little girl lost in the woods and not have a super normal paranormal thingy? Can she just be lost?
I am not against you. I am not against that either. Like, it could have been just as. I mean, again, I've been in those shoes to an extent, smaller scale than this, but like, yeah, like that can be bad enough. Like, it can be.
And honestly, up until I read that information, I read it that way. I read it as what was following her, or what she thought was following her, was just signs of a bear or the bear, and then it just happened at the very end. It was a bear right there, but there really wasn't anything following her. It was just in her head.
That's
Kinda stuff.
exactly what I thought, that she was just imagining things because she's terrified. Like, that's,
Yeah.
and there's, yeah, like you said, evidence of wildlife just naturally. That's all I thought, until it was like, oh, then we have like an actual face-off, and this is just us, the reader, projecting these things onto it, which, as a writer, like, he has that in his back pocket, right? Like, people that are reading this almost guaranteed have read it. And so, at least for me, like, it could just be the author using something to get into the reader's head to trick them. And I think you could still make that judgment. I think you absolutely could. I don't think there's anything against that.
Yeah.
All right. Questions. I only have 3 because we actually kind of covered one of mine. I was going to ask about, do you think he did a good job with having a 9-year-old girl's voice? And I think we've covered that. So I'm skipping that question, just so you guys know. So question 1, how do your wilderness survival skills compare to Trisha's? I'll happily go first. I would die. That's it. I'm good with that. You guys?
I think at 36 years of age, would be able to match her 9/12-year-old mentality of survival. I think her will probably outdrew mine. I probably would end up giving up after about day 5. I would just stay in the truck, like the truck she found. That might have been even later. But I'd like to say the skills wise, yeah, I mean, about equal.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the only thing that she'd probably be able to beat me, I think I guarantee I top her on in many other categories, which might tip the balance, is like the specific berries and mushrooms which to eat and which to avoid. Like, especially, that's a very local thing too. Like, around here, I don't think I'd still be that great off, but like, I'd have a better chance than being in Maine.
Yeah.
That's why I said I would die, because I'd end up with some sort of poisoning. Like, I don't know enough about that. Now, I would probably logic myself into which way did we come from, which direction is going to be the closest. Like, that might be a little bit better for me. That's
what I was like, just the logical, being able to find your way around. Yeah, I think we have her in spades.
And also, like, close. I'm not saying I'd absolutely make the best, but I could probably build a weapon to, kill some meat if need be, instead of just using a hood to fish with.
Or a fire.
Or a fire, for, if anything, signaling, because she saw the helicopter a couple times, once or twice at least.
That first night?
Yeah.
Fire.
Well, that was the rainy night, so that would have been like the hardest night to do, the fire.
Still.
But yeah.
Either way. Yeah, I think we probably would have. I believe in all 3 of us to survive quicker than she did. At least be found quicker than her. I think that's the important distinction I'm going to make.
Yeah. Okay. Question 2. Why was it Tom Gordon?
I'm going to say that's probably his kid's favorite player. I bet you Steven was talking to his son, and his son mentioned, oh yeah, see this new pitcher they got? He's a badass. I'm just, speculating, but I bet that's why. And then Stephen probably started watching baseball with him, because I don't really picture Stephen King as a baseball fan. He's a Boston fan, don't get me wrong, but not really a baseball guy. He knows pop culture and he knows that kind of stuff. But I can see when his son's probably old enough, gets him into baseball, and his son says Tom Gordon's his guy.
I will let you know, the son that this book is dedicated to is 2 years older than me. So
okay.
Was 22 at the time.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, I could still see it holding, my thought process.
Yeah, I think there could be something to that. But I mean, truly, again, knowing a little bit about who Tom Gordon was, like, he was a stud. Like, he was just, and if that's your team, that's your guy, and you're creating this story, and you're committed to this baseball theme in the contemporary time. Like, that's the player that's there. He's absolutely dominant. especially that year that he's writing about. Like it was a career year for him, and I think it just timing wise, almost. I don't think there's anything else that, and the being really well known for pointing to the sky and projecting that onto a young child, figuring out what is the afterlife type thing as she's being thrown into a realistic situation where she's probably should have died.
Yeah. And I think so the postscript is marked February 1st of 99. That means he wrote this book probably the winter of 99, right after that season. Having read a lot of Stephen King's little articles and interviews, and he tends to take a little idea here and a little idea there and a little idea of this. And I'm sure he was watching this spectacular season of Tom Gordon going, man, that make a great story somewhere. What a great story this is.
Mm-hmm.
How do I use that? And then somebody else has something about a woods, and somebody else has something, and all of a sudden,
boom, that's his thing, right? MASH.
Yep. And that's what makes him so genius, is that none of these are way outlandish. He's not building a giant ice wall or creating a magical school. He's got baseball and wood and a kid lost in a woods. These are normal everyday things, and he puts them together in a way that no one else can, and makes it so relevant, other than the scary beast thingy, so relevant to just normal people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Last question of 2020. Because of that, it is not specifically about this book, but it's in general. We have now read our way through 13 Stephen King novels, correct?
Mm-hmm.
We have hit highlights of the first, I'm going to use the term loosely, the first half of his career, right?
Yeah.
Carrie was published in 76?
Mm-hmm.
Right? This
Mm-hmm.
is 99, so that's 23 years, and then we're going to do the next 20 years next year. Halfway through, have you noticed any changes or interesting takeaways about Stephen King's writing style from the beginning to now, or just in general, having read half through a selection of his first chunk of work?
I mean, I think it's in many ways gotten better, more concise. But that's hard to say too, because Carrie was the smallest book that we've had, and it was, in my opinion, pretty much to the point. So but I feel like if he would have written, I'm just going to use that novel itself, take Carrie, and have that be a story he wrote 15 years later, I feel like there would have been more layering to not just be a girl's coming of age horror story. There would have been some other element that would have made it more compelling to a broader scope without feeling like this one. It's 2 or 3 stories layered together that give it enough flavor for people that, oh well, I've never been lost in the woods. I can't really relate to this. I'm sure it's scary. Cool. But then you bring the other things that give somebody else who has no idea what that would really be like, and give them bits and pieces, and the relationships are rounded. I feel like that's something he's always been good at, but maybe a little more polished and to the point. But even this, I felt like some of it was a bit brief. So it's hard to say, because the book lengths all varied quite a bit. Some of them were quite long. Some of them were short, but felt like they took a long time, in a good way. Like Dolores Claiborne was just jam-packed, and that was not a very long book, but that was so dense with great elements that it felt like, man, I want this to keep going. I want this to take its time, and it did. But then there were other books where they were a little bit longer, and they felt like they were about 5 or 6 times as long in not a good way. I think pacing is the number one thing that I see it fluctuating story by story, and that's all I got right now without rambling for another 45 minutes discussing the 13 books that we've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, Luke pretty much nailed it on the head. My only feeling, I guess, with it is he keeps trying. He does not want to shoehorn himself into any, I shouldn't say genre, but into any realm. Like from what we've read, he's hit, a wide spectrum of thought processes, mostly in the horror, thriller, suspense mentality. But that's his realm, but in that realm, it's such a wide thing. He'll go, from A to B to Z. I think the big difference from Carrie to this, as Luke said, there wasn't as much fleshed out, but I believe this one could have done with a bit more streamlining because it does tend to get over descriptive at times. And I just see that more and more with these later books. He feels that it needs to be overly descriptive, or at least that's the feeling I get. And sometimes it just doesn't. Sometimes it couldn't just be left to the imagination instead of describing every aspect of it. And I think the more and more he's gone with it, he's gotten more into description and less away from story, as compared to originally he was story and the description was just the flavor kind of thing.
Okay. All right. Time for my favorite thing. We'll start with you, Benji, because you actually have one.
I have more. I should have been supervised. It's not my fault. I did not have proper supervision. I absolutely love that line. I could see a 9-year-old saying that. I could see a 13-year-old saying that. I could see a 36-year-old saying that. It's just, I was not properly supervised. It is not my fault. It was like that when I got here. Okay? And it just that.
I've heard you say that before, actually.
Probably.
Every episode like drinks and knows things.
Well, I was thinking more of when I was a kid, but yeah, probably on that podcast too. I was not properly supervised. So yeah.
Hey Melissa, what was your favorite thing? I'm struggling.
It took me a minute to get mine.
I kind of feel the same way. Like, I liked that it felt Lord of the Ringsy. The Hobbit and the marshes, and with Frodo. Like, I appreciated some of that connection because that happens to be my favorite book. So, or one of my favorite books. I have a hard time saying that. So I do think I liked that felt intentional. And I loved the baseball connection. I liked the idea of writing a story specifically about not baseball directly, but a lot of baseball influence. And it felt like somebody who understands the game enough to embed it naturally. So I liked that too. Probably that.
I think you took my 2 that I was working on. I couldn't think of like a specific thing, but yeah, the overall journey aspect of it, regardless of her age and appropriateness for what she's doing, like I appreciated her grit, right? Like no matter how she's doing this or whatever, and I think that's what I'll say. It's just her grit to persevere and continue on, knowing that she's likely done, right? But she never just sits down and calls it a day, even when she falls in her own shit on the hill twice, and even when she's got a face full of mosquito bites, and she just keeps moving, right? Whether it's the right direction or not, she never stops, and that's the only reason she made it, right? Like, obviously we know she makes mistakes, but I think just that perseverance is absolutely her number one trait, and it worked out, which is great. So I think that's what I'll say. And Tom Gordon, just because he was awesome.
All right, so we get to the part where we rank our this book in terms of where it goes with all of the other books we've read. So far, number 1 is Dolores Claiborne, 2 is Pet Sematary, 3 is Green Mile, 4 is Misery, 5 is Needful Thing, 6 is Gerald's Game, 7 was It, 8 is The Shining, 9 is Cujo, 10 is Insomnia, 11 is Salem's Lot, 12 is Carrie, and then 13 is Blink. So we are each going to type in our number in our box, and when I say go, we will hit enter, and the formula will tell us where this ranks in our system. Are you all ready?
Almost.
Luke, I think you're in the wrong box.
I am.
You are. There you are. Are you ready?
Yep.
Luke, I hear typing. Okay, and go.
Wow.
Excellent. So I said 12, Luke said 11, Benji said 10. That ends up as 11, which means it officially out Salem's Lot, but not as high as Insomnia. So I think that's pretty fair. Any other thoughts?
I'm kind of surprised. I kind of thought I'd be the low man on that one.
I struggle between Insomnia and that, but then I really thought about it. And there are a lot of things I really liked in Insomnia that this one, I don't know.
Fair.
I'm typing it in as we go. Let's do some final thoughts. I would like to go last because I have a big one. So, anybody want to jump in?
Sure, I'll go with that. And it's a bit of maybe a direct book comparison between the kind of bottom of the barrel for us. And I don't think that means to say this is a bad book or not worth reading. Like just because it's not as high as, The Shining or anything else, or just because it's just above Salem's Lot, I don't think that means Salem's Lot's a worse book.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing. Like I still think, but I personally still think Cujo is better than both of those for me. And I think if you read them, like Melissa's brought up, she read some of these 20 years ago. I mean, in some cases, and rereading them in a different part of your life or a different just place in your, where you're actually at, like physical space. Like if you read this book and you were literally out in a cabin, you might feel a little bit tighter with some of these things, right? If you're smelling that and you hear the crickets chirping, like it might color that. And with all that to say, like, these are all still really well-written books and worth investing the time into reading them, and just some of them hit you better. And obviously this scoring that we have is a little odd that three of us are voting, and it's kind of a quick formula to say, hey, this is somewhat of an average. And but yeah, I think all 13 of these books were well chosen. So good job, Melissa. Thank you for doing that for us.
Yeah. So that kind of goes into what I was thinking from my final thought. I do agree. This book isn't the worst. It's definitely, I like the ranking that it's in. Like I said, I probably would have put it higher one step, but not going to get into that on there. But I feel like such an asshole for saying this. I kind of feel like I wasted an Audible token on this book. If I could have found it in paperback or something for cheaper and saved it for a book that I really wanted to read, it's fun, but I wish I would have gone to the library for this one. I'll put it that way, over spending money on it. It just doesn't feel like it was. I would have rather read this in a collection of short stories than as a full novel.
Okay. So my final thought starts with a question. We are at the end of 2020, which for a variety of reasons is very good that we're at the end. But that means we have made it through my carefully curated selection of books for you guys. I ask you, was this worth doing this way? Because we had spent so much time going chapter by chapter, right? That was kind of the nature of our podcast company, was to really dive deep into books. We did 2 years on it. Harry Potter's lasted like a decade and a half. You did every single episode of Game of Thrones. This was a much different format. Was it worth doing to try and get a broader view of this particular author?
I enjoy it this way. It gives me time to, I like it being the monthly. I like it. It gives me time to really get into the book, enjoy it. Usually can get through the book twice as long as I start it early. Sometimes I don't and only get one time through. But I like it this way because it's succinct. It's not a deep dive. I don't have to overthink a lot of the stuff. Like when we went chapter by chapter, you have to piece every sentence or every paragraph together and come up with some thought on, something like that. And this, it's easier. It's an easier mental exercise than the other way.
Luke?
So obviously, we have two shows that have been doing this year, and I'm on both of them. So I've had, I'll say, twice as many books to try this out with. And yeah, for me, this is almost more difficult just because of the sheer volume, and I do definitely love to deep dive on the nitty gritty, right? Like that's somewhat of the bread and butter that Melissa and I have gotten so used to on Harry Potter, and even Drinks and Those Things. We went scene by scene. I mean, everyone has a note on every, which can be a little bit much, but guess what? You're not missing anything. And I feel like doing that, and I'm not against this. I think for the books that were chosen, I'm happy with not going deep dives. There was nothing in this series that we did for Floats Down Here that I was like, that's one that I wish we would have done even in like a smaller chunks. Like nothing jumped out at me like this one deserves, not that it was bad or didn't have things. It would just be another huge thing that, one, we don't have the mental time or broadband to do, but nothing felt like it was so blatantly missed that it would be a disservice to the book, is what I'm getting to. Where I do think for, I'll say, the Gets Lit podcast, I do think there's a couple books that we picked that deserved a deeper dive. But that's also going from several different authors where this is
Right.
more focused on one. I think that potentially works better for us as a group to experience all of these, basically building our own Stephen King catalogs, which makes these discussions that much easier because we can reference back to,
Right.
Salem's Lot and this one character. Even if you remember his name, like the other two know exactly who I'm talking about because we already talked about him. And
I have my stack going. I need to
Right.
refresh some of them.
so, yeah, the books that have been chosen, absolutely. I know there are some other books that we are not doing currently, which some people will look at this and say, wow, you're missing a huge, huge portion. We know. Okay, like we know. We are
We're aware.
purposefully putting those off to potentially do a bit of a deeper dive because I don't know them myself. That's kind of my thing, to not know these books at all going into it. But it really seems like how well regarded Dark Tower or The Stand are as huge, huge epics. You almost can't do a quicker view on it like these. These are more like potato chip books, and that's like a feast, is what it feels like.
Yes, that's a really great, like, these really are. I could read a little one here and I could read a little one here and I could read and even if they're not little books, right? Insomnia and Needful Things were huge in particular, but they're not like they're just, it's like the Stephen King version of the romance novels, right? Like, I want to read something good. I don't need to necessarily be like, oh, so invested. And so I'm just going to read. And some of them are a little better than others. And some I might pick up again. And that's okay. But if not, yeah, all right. So I say that because I've got 2021 ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys are with me.
Yep, I like the list.
So I'm going to, just for those of you who are currently watching the live stream, here is our upcoming list. You guys can see that, correct?
A little small, but yeah.
All right. I don't know if I can make it any bigger for our screen here.
If I do,
Yep.
it will mess
There you
several
go.
other
Everything
things
up.
up on my
Okay.
side.
So in January, we're reading a book called Cell. In February, it's Lisey's story. March is Du McKay, spelled Key but K. In April, we are reading 11/22/63.
Yay.
In May, we are reading Joyland. June is Dr. Sleep. July is Mr. Mercedes. August is Revival. September is Finders Keepers. October is End of Watch. November is The Outsides or Outsiders. I think it's Outsides. And December is The Institute. Now, I will tell you that this past year that we just finished, 2020, I had read all but 2 of the books ahead of time. I had never read Salem's Lot and I had never read Cujo. Coming up this year, I have read 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right.
I've only read one.
So
I've heard of 2.
yeah, probably one from the show, and then one is the sequel to The Shining.
Correct.
The only one I'm really nervous about for you guys, to be honest, is the last one, because we didn't read Firestarter, which is not necessarily a full-on, like, The Institute is not necessarily a full-on
Sequel.
sequel, but but if you've read Firestarter, there's sort of this underlying tone of like, oh, that's what that is. So for extra credit, if you read Firestarter on your own, I will give you bonus points. There has been some talk of potentially working in different seasons as extra, like one season at a time. We're going to see how that goes. I don't promise that. I got a different idea for that, but we may get there or not. But those are my list of books. So get ready. We've got another book coming up in a month.
Yeah. And I will say there are also talks of trying to catch up on the movies that we didn't get to for this year's books. I think there were 5 total that we didn't do. Maybe just 4. But we will be trying to do those here coming up. Stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel and you'll get the notifications. And we hope to see you. And we have fun watching those and podcaster commentating on those as well.
Let me just say happy end of 2020 to all of you. I hope you've all stayed safe and healthy. And if you haven't, as safe and as healthy as humanly possible at the moment. I hope your holidays are good. I hope your winter is healthy and avoidance of people. Join us in 2021 and we'll see you soon. So go for it.
All right. With that said, make sure you're finding us on the social medias at Floats Down Here on Twitter and Instagram. Send us a digital mosquito bite on the eyelid to floatsdownhere@gmail.com. Make sure you're finding all of our shows at thepodcastthat.com. Subscribe and rate us on iTunes and on YouTube under Drawbridge Media.
I gotta say, Benji's send us a digital whatever is like one of my favorite things I look forward to on these episodes. You've done a good job. I appreciate that. That's what I appreciate about you. But this show and all of our shows at thepodcastthat.com are produced with the love and support of our really wonderful Imaginary Legion patrons. You can learn more about the reward tiers that we have over at patreon.com/stayimaginary.
All right. So join us in January when we read Cell, which I have not read. So I just copied and pasted this from Wikipedia. The story follows a New England artist struggling to reunite with his young son after a mysterious signal broadcast over the global cell phone network turns the majority of his fellow humans into mindless, vicious animals.
You'll float too.
Hey, Imaginary.
Thanks.
The podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first-time Stephen King reader.